part of the small series we've begun. So, as you can see, I'm not in my practice room. I'm actually in holidays with my family in southern France. So I hope all you guys are okay and that it will help you in any way. So, the first small video I did was about a lot of things actually. I've got the notes, I'll just see them. Sorry, I just took care of my two children and having that in mind. So the first part we had together was kind of like about the manners of sitting, about using wood, using the bells, about how to lead a sitting with all the claps and bells and things. Some of you sent me some questions about this. I hope I answered the questions, really this technical stuff. It's not important to know them by heart. What's important is to use them, really. So we'll get into this later. So I'm here now to present you some practices. First of all, let me talk about this thing. So one of you asked me about the rakusu in Chinese Buddhism, saying, okay, I've never seen a Chinese monk with a rakusu. Actually, that's quite true. You won't probably see any of them. Ming Zen did an extensive research on rakusu in Chinese Buddhism, and she's told me that she saw some of them in southern China in 1989. They were very clear, kind of whitish colors. So there were some, but that's not really something you see very often. The kind of rakusu, and especially mani rakusu, the one-piece rakusu, you will see is this one. So what's this thing? This thing is just a bag. Actually, it's a monk bag. You can, generally there's kind of shape or anything on it, and these bags are what are today the closest thing to a rakusu in Chinese Buddhism, and sometimes you see them hanging around the shoulder. The traditional way to wear it actually is in front of you, just like a rakusu, because that's really what the rakusu is today in Chinese Buddhism, a bag. It's just like two rakusus put together and sewn on the borders so that you can use it as a bag. So for your question about rakusu in Chinese Buddhism, you will probably not find it that much today because it seems very Japanese, and yeah, Chinese people don't like Japanese people, and Japanese people don't like Japanese people, and we don't have a dog in this fight, so yeah, we just don't care about it. So there are a lot of mosquitoes around here. I'm just next to a river, so lots of mosquitoes, especially this year. Anyway, so if you see me do this kind of thing, I'm not getting crazy, I'm just taking the mosquitoes away. Really a lot of them. Anyway, so that's about the rakusu in Chinese Buddhism. Really a bag today, something very practical, and that's also what I like about Chinese culture, is that it is very practical in a way. So, back to the practices. So, maybe we can just think a bit about what are we doing here? I mean, what is this meditation stuff, and is it really useful to meditate? I mean, most of us will spend our whole lives, years and years and years and decades, practicing meditation. And I think it's important to have a broadened view on things, just to remember some different kind of practices, or different ways practices can be used. Okay? It is very important to understand the function of different practices or the different stages on your path, and not to try to blend the different functions together. Otherwise it will just be a mess, And that's what happens generally with people. So, if I can put it in a nutshell, the first kind of practices you will probably practice for months and months at the beginning is just some kind of breathing practices, and I will introduce one or two practices like that just after this. So that's really, I like to say it's a practice to launch the breathing machine, to just have a profound, very profound breath, to establish a breath for the meditation going on later. In the way we do that now, it is generally kind of a 5-minute practice at the beginning of the formal Zen meditation. So, this is it. Then, what next? So, someone beginning the practice will probably do some breathing practices, and that must be his principal, main kind of practice for months generally, before really he gets it. And after that, he can practice some kind of concentration practice. It can be any kind of concentration practice. And what a concentration practice is a practice that helps you to focus on a single point, to kind of narrow your attention and use it like a tool to be able to focus on a very single point. That's really, the point of it. And when a firm concentration is established to any kind of practice, okay, we can, from that very narrow, one-pointed concentration, open up and observe things, okay? And when we don't have to do a distinction between that phase of narrowing attention and then opening attention, that first phase of concentration, and then that phase of observation, when it becomes so natural that you just have to sit and naturally you're concentrated and open and observing. That's what we call concentration and observation in harmony. That's really the core of Chinese meditation. From the very first Chinese Buddhist school, actually is the Tiantai school, Tendai in Japanese, established by Qi or Zi, and his whole point was actually to make sense of all the Indian practices that came to him, and Indian sutras, and he established himself in the Lotus Sutra, as we know. But in terms of very practice, what he did is actually said, okay, there are concentration practices and there are observation practices, and the important thing is that you must have the samadhi attain. Sorry, I'm very tired. You must attain the samadhi of oneness. There's just one practice, what he called in Chinese Ji Quan, or in Japanese Chi Kan, which is concentration and observation as one practices. Okay, so we begin by just breathing and learning really a profound breathing practice. And when we are sufficiently established into it, we come to a concentration practice. And then when we master that concentration practice, we can observe from that thing. And then the practice is just to concentrate and observe. Okay, that can seem very complicated, actually. What I want to say is that these different phases actually can be done with a single practice, okay? And the practice that's most used, of course, I will come to it later, but the practice that's most used in our tradition is repeating a sacred name. Generally, it's a Buddha's name, okay? You can help use a Buddha's name repetition to train your breath, and then concentrate on it one-pointedly, and then ask who is repeating that name, that's the observation part, and then from it you can just do concentration. Sorry, it's very itchy, all these mosquitoes, and then from it you can just practice Huatu in a very open way. There is actually a difference between the Huatu of pure observation and the Huatu, the very open Huatu of observation and concentration at the same time. Okay, and I will get onto it later, but that's the main difference between the Huatu as told by Master Han Shan and the Huatu as told by Master Suyun. I will get onto it later. But first, really, what are these breathing practices? There are a lot of them. And first, I want to say something very important. Whatever practices you're doing, it's important to recognize the fact that we want equilibrium, harmony between tension and openness, if I may say. Okay, there is some part of it which is into tension, and there is some part which must be very open. I say that because sometimes we see people with a very nice posture. They are very tense, like mountains, you know. But they are so tense that actually there is nothing going on in their mind. And often these kind of people will tell you after meditation, oh, it was so easy. I spent 2 hours of Zazen and it just did go away like that. That's not the point. We are not sitting athletes, okay? We are trying to master attention. That's it. And attention is not about sitting and not seeing anything and just time passing away like that. You must be totally aware of what's happening, and most of the time it's hell. It's pure hell, and that's not a problem. And it can also be pure ecstasy, pure even, not a problem. Okay? So don't try to avoid tension, but don't think that tension is the way. Actually, Mingzhen would say, used to say, yeah, I always forget that she's not with us. But anyway, so Mingzhen used to say that our practice is not about tension. So when there is too much tension in your practice, just in your sitting practice particularly, and you've got your feet and everything hurting that much, and you can't concentrate anymore, then just change posture. Our school is the school of mind, not the school of the body, actually. So just change posture. What's important is actually the quality of attention. So if you need to get up while everyone else is still sitting, there is no problem with that. Just signal it with your hands, and then, just walk, actually, silently, respectively, with respect, just walk through the practice room, and that's it. There is no problem with that. The point we want to, I really want to insist on, is that the quality of attention is what matters, not the posture, I don't care about that, okay? I care about the quality of your posture. So before going on into the different, into some kinds of breathing practices, which can be very useful, I want to make something very clear. From time to time, I talk about qi, inner breath, or about channels, which can be in the inner channels of the different traditions. In our chant path, we don't go into much details about these. We just know that these are there, and really, channels and qi exist in every tradition, okay? And that's kind of a good thing to see that when a serious practitioner anywhere on earth, in every tradition, does the job of serious practice, he will have a sense of these inner channels, of this inner breathing going on. Now, some traditions say there are a certain set of channels, some says there are other set of channels, some tradition give it specific colors, some tradition give it another set of colors. I don't care about this, and this is not our path. Really, be very attentive about not being a master. Oh, there's an ambulance passing. Sorry. So be very attentive about not being a master about. Sorry, not being a master of these yogas and everything. You know, what I want to say here is that you can face many states in your practice. Some of these states are delightful, real ecstasy. Okay, don't cultivate them for themselves. They will happen naturally. There are consequences of a right practice. But if you find them so adorable that you want to have them and dwell in these states again and again, you're not going up the mountain. You're just stuck in these states, and that's not the point, really. Especially if you are influenced by the Tibetan tradition. Tibetans are masters in a lot of practices which are not enlightenment, which are not practices aimed at enlightenment itself. And especially these inner, Tibetan yogas and inner channels, or Taoist yogas and inner channels and everything. These are things you will hear about, and even I will talk about them from time to time. Don't try to be a master of it or research too much about it, okay? What's important to have in mind about these channels is basically, okay, some traditions say, well, all traditions talk about the main channel, which is really the channel going from the top of your head to the root chakra, or whatever name you want to give it, okay, to the entry point there below, okay? So it's the central column. Some traditions see is that central column of air, of inner breath, are white, some seeds are blue or red. I don't care about that, okay? Now, there is this central column of hair, of the central channel, and then some tradition says the other important main channels are lateral channels going that way, okay, and then they go to the central channel here, and then they go to the root chakra down there. I can show you actually right now, but it's down there, okay? That's one way of seeing it. The Tibetan way does like that. Some Chinese school see it like that too. Now, a lot of Chinese schools, and especially Taoist schools, see, of course, a main channel, as I said, but they say that the other two main channels are one in the front and one in the back. I don't care about it, okay? For me, there is just one main channel, which is the central channel. That's the one maybe you can be aware of or work with. Actually, there are hundreds and hundreds of channels in our bodies, and actually all the traditions are okay saying that there are hundreds and hundreds of channels, but each master of each kind of tradition said, okay, there is that central channel, and I want you guys to focus on that lateral channel, or the back and the back and front channel. Okay, that's good with them. I don't go into these details. It's actually not that important at all. So why am I talking about it, you might say? Okay, it's just more of you get to be aware of it, to have a sense of it in your practice, especially in the breathing practices, okay? Because it can influence your posture. If you, for example, try to visualize your central channel going from the tip of your head to your root chakra, actually to your perineal zone, to your heart, I might say, okay, you will naturally be more, have a posture which is more upright. That's really the good thing about visualizing that central channel. And I could speak for hours about this, but I won't do that now. If I'm talking about this chi and channels and this thing, is because basically in the tradition, the first practices we do as a beginner or at the very beginning of our sitting practice are practices which are linked to breathing, okay? And there are a lot of practices, especially in Zen, in Chan, about internal breathing and kind of launching the machine of internal breathing to have a very deep breath before meditation. The most known, actually, the most known practices like that are the practices you won't see as practices. For example, generally in a temple or monastery, there is a call to meditation, and in a lot of traditions, when you hear the bell, you've got to run, or if you don't run, you've got to walk very fast through it. Here is your first chi breathing practice, to run. That's a wonderful practice. Okay, another practice that is really about chi and deep breathing and installing the breath, and you might don't think it in that way, is actually chanting. Whoa, that's a big thing. I don't want it to bite me. Well, so chanting is a wonderful practice. When you chant out loud, it's a wonderful breathing practice, and we all had that same experience. When you begin chanting, your voice is kind of cut, your breath isn't very deep, and when you chant more and more and more, you can breathe more and more, and your breath is very profound at a certain point, really. So that's another practice. Another kind of practice which is really related to also launching the internal breath machine, and that we generally don't think about it that way, is really bowing, prosternations, okay, bowing. In some traditions, or actually in all traditions, bowing is very important, but in some traditions or in some retreats or in some times, special times, especially in retreats or solitary retreats, before even sitting, you will bow 10, 35, 108 times. These all exist. Okay, why do you bow so much? Okay, we can speak about bowing in a lot of ways. There is something very humbling with it. There is some kind of oneness feeling when you bow and bow and bow and bow, and at a certain point you bow beyond yourself, beyond the fact that you want to bow or not to bow. You just bow. Okay, that's a wonderful thing. But that's also because bowing is a wonderful chi breathing practice. Okay, so that's one of the aspects I wanted to talk about here. Now, I will probably present you very briefly different kinds of practice you could do. One of these practices very linked to the central channel visualization and these things, but that you can do without all that internal stuff. And when I say internal stuff, if you want to visualize, be very simple. Just visualize a central channel. Actually, it's a quite thin channel, like a thumb. Okay, generally white, blue. I like to see it as blue because that's the practice I received. Actually, I received that kind of practice from several masters, but the first one I received and the one I continue with it was a blue central channel, and just kept it. Could be any color really, which is very simple. Actually, you just breathe in, okay? You feel the breath in your belly, kind of accumulates, and you breathe out through the channel to the top of your head. That's really the simplest way of doing it. Breathing in to the central channel, it accumulates in your belly until it kind of goes to the root, and you've got a feel of it pushing to the root, and then you do an out breath and it just goes out to the top of your head. I don't want to go into much details about it. A way of practicing it, which is very dynamic, and I like it really, It's called 9 breaths meditation. Again, different ways of doing it in different traditions. If you already do it in a tradition or another, just continue as you know. I just want to do a very quick presentation for people who don't understand it. So the point basically is just that you take your hand and you put it on one of your nostrils, okay? Traditionally, in the way I received it, these fingers, I don't know how you say it, the annular fingers, the one with your ring on, okay, are the fingers linked to a very important channel, both in Tibetan and Chinese yogas. And through this channel you can lose a lot of energy, that's what traditionally is told. So you block these channels by putting your thumb on the basis of that ring, on the ring finger. Okay, I don't know what you call it. Okay, so you just put it like that. Okay, so you put it there, and the way I received it is that this finger, you know, you see the big finger, you put it on your left nostril. Okay, could be on the right nostril, I don't care about it. Okay, so just with your hand you block a nostril, the air goes in, okay, you keep the air on, and then you change nostrils, the air goes out. Okay, you do that 3 times. Again, the air goes in, you keep it, the air goes out. Okay, 3 times, and then you pause for a little time. Then the second round of 3 breathings, you do it, the air goes in, you keep it, the air goes out. The air goes in, you keep it, change, the air goes out. The air goes in, you keep it, the air goes out. That's not really that complicated. And then with both nostrils, the air goes in, you accumulate it, and then it goes out to the central channel in the top of your head. And again, the air goes into both channels, you accumulate it, and then it goes out. And you do that 3 times, and at the end of these 3 rounds of 3 breathings, actually, the 9 breathing entry, the introduction, the 9 breathing practice for the beginning of your meditation is actually finished, and that's great. A great meditation. If you want to go further in that type of meditation, please go look after it. There are lots of different types of meditation based on that kind of system. If you want to know more about it, you can also, of course, just ask questions about it, and I will do it. But the 2 main breathing practices I want to introduce to you, because actually I'm looking at the hours and think to myself that I've got kind of 6 or 7 breathing practices to introduce, and it will be impossible to introduce them all. So the 2 main kinds of chi circulation practices, that can be the breathing practice you practice before the actual meditation, or if you are really a beginner, you will practice as your main practice, probably for 1 to 3 months generally it takes before really getting used to it. Are these 2. First, the healing breath that my teacher Mingzen Chakya used so much and liked so much, the healing breath, and 2 is the butter lamp or medicine pill meditation. So first, the healing breath. So the healing breath is what is also called the vase breathing in Tibetan tradition. Basically, it's really simple. Okay, way more simpler than what I introduced with the 9 breaths. Okay, the simplest form is just you breathe in, you keep your breath, and then you take it out. That's it. Just breathing in, keeping the breath, breathing out. Okay. The thing is that you do it with a ratio. Okay. So I know that Mingzen really liked her ratio, but that's not a ratio that is for beginners. So I won't go into that ratio. We talk about this with her for many times, and I really think that for me, and she allowed me, of course, to practice and share it in that way, the best and simplest thing is actually to have the same ratio for breathing in, for keeping, and then for breathing out, which is about 5 seconds. Could be longer, of course, if you get used to it. Okay, so what is it? Very simply, you just put yourself in your meditation posture. Of course, being very upright not that necessary. It's better to be upright, but don't be upright with too much tension. You can just move a little bit to be balanced. That's really about it. And then you just breathe in for 5 seconds. Keep the air for 5 seconds. And then breathe out for 5 seconds. And again, breathe in for 5 seconds. Keep the air for 5 seconds. And breathe out for 5 seconds. So that's really basically the healing breath meditation. That's all there is to it. Okay, there can be a lot of meditation. You can visualize the central channel. You can just visualize the breath as you feel it. Generally, it's a visualization like a white fog. That's very traditional. Visualizing the breath as a white fog getting in, accumulating in the dantian or ara or tanden. Choose the word you want. In your belly, okay. So a white cloud in your belly, and then the white going out. Okay, you can do it with visualization. You can do it without visualization. Visualization is really something to help you. It's really about helping you. So don't make a fuss about visualization. As I said earlier, don't try to be a master of visualization. That's not the point. The point is attention. Okay, so just be fully attentive, the most attentive you can be. Okay, that's really the point. So that was really about healing breath meditation. You can find notes about it in several of Ming Zen books. So again, you can ask me questions, but that's a very simple kind of breathing meditation. That's the main breathing meditation I use really before sitting. So that kind of meditation can be used in conjunction with concentration practices. I won't get into it too much, but basically there is a very traditional practice called Hu Xin, which is really it means empty mind. Hu Xin or Mu Xin if you want. Okay, and basically just when you breathe in your mind, you say Wu or Mu. Or woo for 5 seconds. Then you hold on, you don't say nothing, you don't say a thing, and when you breathe out, you say Shin. It can also be done with Huan, you keep it Yin. Okay? Kuan Yin is also, well, anyway. So the Wu Shin type of meditation can also be used with that healing breath. Know that the Wu Xin meditation is a meditation per se. The difference between the healing breath and the Wu Xin meditation is that in the healing breath, especially in the way I present it, you breathe in for 5 seconds, you keep the breath for 5 seconds, and you breathe out for 5 seconds. Okay? In the traditional Wu Xin, and I will probably present it later if it needs to, there is no time setup. Okay? You just naturally let your breaths go. You just do woo, and when you breathe out, you say Shin. Breathing in, you say Wu. Breathing out, you say Shin. Again, it can be Kuan Yin. Breathing in is Kuan. Breathing out is Yin. That's a wonderful thing. So the difference is that in the Wushin traditional meditation, you don't have to hold the breath for 5 seconds. You will see that very naturally, if that's your main practice, very naturally, the space between the breathing in and the breathing out, between the Wu and the Shin, between the Quan and the Yin, will be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And at a certain point, it can be quite frightening, because very naturally in your sitting, you will breathe in, and hell, when will I breathe out? You know, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger naturally. Don't try to force it. It is really the Wushin meditation. It's a natural breath meditation, okay? And that's something I will get on maybe later if you ask me to. But all these meditation, healing breath, Wushin, repeating a sacred name, they are kind of intermingled. They are actually not different meditation. There are very slight differences between them, but they are not that different after all. So, again, healing breath, that's the main kind of breathing practice you've got to learn, you've got to master, and you can share without any problem to anyone, any tradition, okay? The second kind of practice I will share is a bit different, okay? The healing breath practice I just presented, and I've really presented very briefly also the Wushin practice. These practices are really about qi circulation and about launching you into meditation. Actually, they can be used as main meditation practices. The second meditation I will actually, well, the other meditation I want to present now, it is not the second, because I talk about the 9 breath meditation, the Wushin healing breath. Well, anyway, the other type of meditation I want to present to you now is called the, there are so many names for it, butter lamp or egg pill meditation. Basically, and you will see that in many traditions, basically what it is imagine that you are in a retreat. You are very tense, very focused on your point, on your goal. And I will do a small video about it later, about doing retreats, particularly solitary retreats, because one of you who is a very serious practitioner asked me about it. So I think it will help everyone. But anyway, so when you are in a retreat, generally you've set an intent to your retreat. You've got a kind of goalless goal to it, but you are very focused on your retreat. Okay, sometimes you can be so much focused about it that there is just too much tension in your body. You are really, your mind is very clear, your zen is very clear, really. You are at the door of attention, so focused, it's so sharp, like a blade, like a sword, really. But your body is so tense that you can't go further. It's impossible, okay? Your body is like a block. Then the butter lamp or egg pill or medicine pill meditation is a wonderful thing really. This meditation exists in several kinds of traditions, Taoist tradition, Tibetan traditions, actually Pure Land traditions, a lot of them. Basically, it's very simple. You just imagine on the top of your head, so you are in a retreat setting, there's a lot of tension, okay? Don't continue. You can stay seated, that's not the problem really. What I want to say, don't continue your concentration or observation practices. Don't continue to chant the name of the Buddha. Don't continue the Huatu. Don't continue the just sitting, okay? Do that practice if it's really too much of attention, okay? Basically, what is that practice? Very simple. You imagine something like that, about the size of an egg or a ping pong ball, okay? On the top of your head. That thing is very bright, very bright. It is really the essence of light, the essence of your own nature. You can give it that quality, okay? Also know that in this practice, actually visualization is kind of important. When I say visualization, it doesn't mean that you've got to see things like in a photography. You've got to feel it. Visualization is really about feeling things, okay? So you kind of feel there is something on the top of your head about that size, and that thing is very dense, full of light, very warm, okay? And it begins to kind of melt on the crown of your head, and it feels so good. It just relieves all the tension on the crown of your head, and then in your eyes, and as you see, of course, then in your head, then on your all shoulders, and take all the time you need for it, okay? You just continue melting down and melting down and melting down, and then your shoulders, the tension is relieved, and then you just go to your heart, and it opens up your heart. Basically, you just feel that there is light, fog, a cloud, a sensation of warmth, or a sensation of whiteness. Generally, these are all blended together, really good qualities, I would say, that go out of that top of your head egg, really, or round thing, and just, sorry, as you know, English is not my native language, but, and just put all the tensions away. You just are basically, as it melts down through your body, and you visualize it melting down to your body, you just are less and less tense and more stable in your practice, okay? So the point of that practice is very simple, is to relieve the tension, and it is a very nurturing practice. It means I love that practice. She used it in another form, I won't go into it, which was very, very Taoist, which used the central channel, the front and back channel, and then she used to visualize a bow which go through all the channels one by one. That's not necessary, okay? And that's the very end or the very highest form of that meditation. The simplest form is just, there is an egg on the top of my head, and that egg is melting white and warm things that make my body feeling better. That's really it. If you want to actually have another view on that meditation, I think in Japanese it's called Kakyu Noho or something like that. Hakuin Zenji, the great reformer of Rinzai Zen tradition in Japan, was a big admirer and teacher of that kind of practice too. I think is in a talk called Yasen Kana. In English it must be something like a talk on a bark, where he basically says that he was in a point in his meditation where he couldn't go forward. He had a lot of tensions and he was about to die, and he did go to a mountain and see a kind of hermit there, which was a kind of blend between a Confucian, Taoist and Buddhist hermit, and he learned that practice from it. So that practice is very simple, and it can relieve so much tension really. So it's not a chi breathing practice per se. It is not with that kind of practice that you begin your first day of meditation, if you do a retreat, or the beginning of your meditation session, if you just lead meditation with your Sangha. But it is a wonderful practice if you are meditating for several hours of several days and there is just too much tension. So really, basically, healing breath is the best and simplest technique you will you can practice and share with others. It's very basic: breathing in for a certain time, holding the breath for a certain time, breathing out for a certain time. That's all there is to it, okay? Get natural with it and it will be very easy for you. Then that other kind of practice, which is not per se cheap practice, but can help between two seated meditation sessions, or, well, can help really when you are stuck, when there is too much tension, when you feel that your mind wants to go further but your body just can't. And if you're serious in a practice, that will happen, that's for sure. I don't say if you are a beginner, but at a certain point there are several kind of passes, gates we've got to pass in our practice. And yeah, that practice, Kakyu no Ho in Japanese, or butter lamp, or egg peel meditation, choose the name you want. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful practice for that. So these two are the most used simple practices, I would say, to begin with. Maybe another one, very simple, very, very simple again, is the healing, the Dantian breath, which is Tanden breath or Ara breath, we could say. Basically not that different again from the healing breath practice. Very, very simple. All you do is just breathing in, okay, keeping the air, and then breathe out. We will see, okay, but what's the difference with the healing breath practice you've been talking about earlier? Actually, not that much. The difference is that there is a set time for the healing practice. There isn't a set time for the Dantian or Tanden breath technique. The other difference, and that's also why I'm talking about this, is that in the healing breath practice, you actually follow your breath as it goes in. Your attention, if you want, follows your breath. Okay, so it goes really. Your attention is here, 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 and out. Okay, so that's how it goes. In the Dantian breath or Tanden breath, your attention is always here. Okay, and that's really the block. That's where you are. Basically, that's where your attention is. Always, and all the rest doesn't count. It is also kind of concentration practice. So you breathe in from here and you breathe out from here. You can keep the breath, not keep the breath, no importance really. Do it naturally. Don't try to hold the breath too much, okay? So if there is a small holding of the breath, it must be natural, okay? So that's it really, the Tanden breath meditation, very, very simple kind of meditation, and it also can be a very, very good technique to all your meditation. Well, anyway, I'm talking about something else, but it won't be possible to present you it now. Basically, I want to present some other kinds of practices here which can be used before or even when sitting as concentration practices. The Dantian breath or Tanden breath I just presented is one of the different kinds of one-pointed breath practices. Of course, the one point here is this part, but you can also concentrate fully on the breath going through your nose. That's also a one-point breath practice, okay? You can also concentrate on your belly, and uniquely on your belly going up and down. That's also one-pointed breath practice. I like more the all Dantian because it's a wider area, and that's really something very mechanical, and it feels really natural after a certain point. Okay, so these are all the kinds of one-pointed breath techniques. Another kind of technique I want to very briefly present, and again, the main techniques I want you to focus on, to know and to share eventually are the healing breath techniques, and the other part is the butter lamp technique. Okay, all the other techniques you can ask me about, you can practice them, but it's just for you to know that they exist. Okay, the other kind of technique which is really known is what is in a vulgar way, in a simple way, called the body scan the body scan technique. That's really a wonderful technique about impermanence. How does it go? Basically, you just scan your body and you put your full attention to your body from the tip of your head to the point of your toe. That's really, really important. And in general, when you try to be concentrated from the top of your head to the tip of your toe. That's very important. So, the body scan, you kind of focus on your body by trenches, by parts of about 5 to 10 centimeters. For example, you begin by concentrating from the top of your head to the basis of your eyes. For some minutes, when you do that, you go from the top of your eyes to that part, really, from your nose, and from the nose to the mouth, and nose to the neck, okay? What it does really is, it's a wonderful impermanence practice, because you kind of figure out how you're made and how fragile you are. Especially in that part, the mouth to the neck. Oh, it's so fragile up there. Okay, so you scan yourself from part to part, part to part, part to part, to the tip of your toes. That's the body scan practice. They are very traditional. It's a very traditional practice. I'm sorry, I'm just being bitten by the mosquitoes so much. You can't see them, but wow, dozens and dozens and dozens, that my leg is actually hurting about. But anyway, so the body scan technique, it's a very traditional technique, and you can find it in Theravada schools. But it's a wonderful technique if you want to go in. Another breathing technique, which is also a concentration technique, I'll talk about it a bit. And again, these techniques are all intermingled into one another. And the basic techniques I want you to learn and share is healing breath and butter lamp or egg peel meditation. One on your head, okay? All the others, I want you to know them, maybe try them, but you don't have to master them to lead the Sangha. So the other one is simply following the breath, okay? Following the breath is very simple. You just follow the breath, okay? It goes in, you go in. It is in your belly, you put your attention in your belly. You just go, your attention go with your breath. And again, as I say often, we are not technique masters. We want to be attention masters. Really, our point is attention, nothing else. So that's how it goes, really. Following the breath is a wonderful, wonderful technique. Most of the techniques I just talked about were actually taught in that very way, mostly, by Chi, the founder of the Tiantai school. And especially in these 6 wonderful doors, something like that. It's a text called 6 Wonderful Doors, something like that. Wow, I've got again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 mosquitoes on my leg right now. Well, anyway, just giving them food. Wow, and yeah, so much of them. So, So Chi talked about these meditations, and what's interesting is that he showed very well that you could practice just one of these, and it's okay, or you could practice all of these. What's important is to actually understand and function, how they are the same, and how they are different. You know, to really know them. That's really it. But again, what I want you to focus on and to share is healing breath and butter lamp, okay? Because really healing breath is kind of the simplest form of the most breathing techniques I just show you very briefly, okay? So if you get questions about it, please, please, please ask me. But basically, healing breath and butter lamp meditation is the most important thing for you to go on. Okay, so maybe that's okay for today. I know it's a very messy kind of video, but again, it's just a video to say some things about these techniques because I'm kind of tired to always say the same thing to everyone. So it's also a way to share it. A good time with every one of you, and that's it. But don't think that these videos are enough. Please ask me questions about your own practice about this. Also, something else that I want to make clear is that these practices, and again, healing breath and butter lamp are really the ones I want you to know, practice and share, are mostly for before serious meditation, before Zen meditation, okay? For these 5 minutes before a formal sitting, okay? Of course, again, beginners might practice, especially healing breath, for at least 1 month generally. That's what it takes to be serious about the practice. And you may ask, okay, but what then? What is next? What is next is either you continue with one of these. Traditionally, that's not what we do. As you know, the main practice of Chinese Buddhism, really, Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, is chanting the name. So, what will you do next? You will just chant the name, and that's our main concentration practice, really. And again, you could chant the name while doing the healing breath practice. You could do a syllable when breathing in, say nothing when you're holding the breath, and then another syllable when you're breathing out, especially if you are practicing as your main practice a 2 syllable sacred name as Kuan Yin, of course. Well, that's it really. Of course, for the next small video I will talk about the most used concentration practice. It will just be probably a small introduction, which is really the chanting or reciting the sacred name practice. I will just introduce it very briefly, and you might say, okay, in the Sangha there are 4 main kinds of practices. Nianfo Chan or Nembutsu Zen. There is Huatu Chan or Huato Zen. These 2 kinds are goal-oriented practices. Concentration practices, if you want. There is a part of observation, of course, as we will see. When we are serious about this, it isn't only about concentration. Of course, there is observation in it. But it is very goal-oriented. And then there is Kuan Yin Chan, Kanon Zen, which is really just listening. Or there is, and then the 4th one, Mo Chao Chan, or Mokuso Zen, which is just sitting. These aren't goal-oriented practices at all. Don't think I will talk extensively about Huatu Chan, Kuan Yin Chan or Mo Chao Chan right now to you guys. We've got to first be serious. I very briefly, I will say, introduced the healing, the breathing practices before meditation, but we will go extensively, really extensively, into Nianfo Chan or Nembutsu Zen, the Zen of reciting the name before going to Huatu. Okay, I will use for that, and that will be the subject of the next videos. Okay, I will use for that a text called 48 Methods to Nianfo. In the most known version of it is called, it has been translated by Vietnamese lineage, and it's called Taming the Monkey Mind. You can find it everywhere for free. I did a version on our resources part on our website. I did a version with the parts that we use the most. I think there are 48 parts in that text, and we kind of use mostly 32 or 35 Ds, something like that. Okay, so I will focus on these, and especially to begin with on the 9 first ones, which is kind of the introduction, and it's kind of a mini manual of reciting the name or Nien Fo Chan. So I will go extensively into Nien Fo Chan or Nembutsu Zen or later. And just very briefly, do you know what it means, Nien Fo? That's very interesting. Nien means remembering or having at earth, like when you remember someone, there is kind of his image in your earth. That's lovely. And you remember or you keep at earth the Buddha. That's all our Chan path, keeping the Buddha as earth. And at first, generally, when you practice meditation, when you practice concentration, you see the Buddha as very far away, and you try to keep it at earth. And with time, you realize that the Buddha is within you. You are the Buddha. And these are different steps, kind of realizations in the practice. And you keep just Buddha at earth. How wonderful is that, to keep Buddha at earth, to remember the Buddha that we are. So that's really the theme of what we will do next. So again, I'm sorry for the very messy videos, and I hope these help you in a way or another. I want to talk about too much things at a single time, but I wanted to do just a simple video about these breathing practices before meditation, before getting into the real stuff, I would say, of Nien Fo Chan and recitation Zen. So, thank you for your time, guys, and I hope that will help you. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and see you very soon. I know that some of you are in a very good phase of your life, and I bow to them. And I know that some of you are in a very difficult, very, very difficult phase of your life, and I bow to them, because I've been there before, as I said to them in private. So, Ham it all for, dear friends.